I'm Don Blosser. Welcome to our time together this evening. I'm absolutely thrilled that we have this many people willing to come out on such a nice day to think about faith and where we come from in it. I'm delighted to welcome you here. I'll line up just for the program schedule so you know what to expect. We're expecting Michael to speak for 45 minutes and then do 20 minutes or so for question and answer. That will run us a little over an hour, so we're not going to take a bathroom break in the middle. Be comfortable. If you so need to just take care of yourself, we'll understand. Oh, anybody like to have an outline for tonight? Raise your hand. Up here to my left. While they're doing that, I'm going to talk to you. Keep your hand up. I'm going to talk to you a bit. I still remember the first time I met Michael Spath. We were at Emmaus Road Fellowship South in Bern, Indiana, and Michael talked about Palestinian peace issues, and I was impressed. And we've been good friends ever since. He is the founder and director of the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace. That's a group that is concerned about Palestinian issues and peace issues in the Middle East. Michael, if you like to know more, Michael leads tours to the Middle East. I would make a sentence of comparison. Many tours to Palestine take you to places where you see things. If you go with Michael, you will meet people, Palestinian pastors, congregational members, citizens who had their houses bombed. It's an educational experience to meet people. I would recommend it for you. Michael is a Fulbright scholar with 2 doctorals in historic religion and world religions. He has a serious interest in theological history and religious development. In 1993, Michael hosted the Dalai Lama for an interfaith service of prayer and peace, which brought together representatives of 14 different world religions. Now, that's not 14 Christian denominations, but 14 world religions. He's an active member of United Church of Christ in Fort Wayne, cares deeply about faith, his own, but what I admire is he cares deeply about the faith of other people who are different from himself. It's my judgment that we're in for a treat tonight that will challenge us to think of our own faith, be better acquainted with other people's faith, and make this world a better place for all of us to live. I'm absolutely delighted to have you here and equally delighted to welcome Michael. Blessings on you, Michael. It's all yours.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to this, the first of this 3-part series, which I've entitled Religion, Where It Came From. Sorry, guys. Do I need to? Yeah, thanks. Where it's heading and how it continues to change the world. My name indeed is Michael Spath, and I'm a retired professor of religious studies and executive director, as Don said, of the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace, based in Fort Wayne. I'll be leading my 16th Solidarity Tour to Palestine and Israel this June, where we meet with not only Palestinian Christians, but also Muslim and Jewish voices of conscience in the region who are working for nonviolent social transformation. And that's the goal of our trip, to meet with the people there. I'm also leading a trip with a friend of mine, a South African pastor who was a dear, dear friend of Desmond Tutu's, leading a trip to Cape Town and Johannesburg in September. It's a Tutu seminar, and we'll be gone for a couple of weeks then. And we have monthly programs in Fort Wayne. If you're interested, you can talk to me or check us out on our website. Indiana Center for Middle East Peace. I want to say thanks to the organizers of Chautauqua Wawasee, especially their theology, I call it the religion working group. John Beams and Dave Beery, I know, were the ones who met with me. So really, this is part of a Chautauqua Wawasee series held here at Greencroft. And so I want to make mention that it's part of a series, an ongoing series with music and art and other kinds of lectures. So John and Dave, who's away tonight, thank you for the invitation to be here. I also want to say thanks to the people at Greencroft. I met Mark and John, who's the IT guru. I met you all tonight. Thank you for being so generous with your time and expertise. And of course, my dear buddy, Don Blosser. You know, Don, I was going to crack a joke, but let me just be serious. Don, what a gift to this area, to Goshen College, now to Greencroft, a gift to the church for these many years. I think, Don, you're pushing 60 now. And so you've been a gift for many, many years.
This is the third wedding.
And yeah, kindergarten sweethearts. And in all seriousness, Nan, give our love to Carolyn and give her a kiss on the cheek for us. So at the outset, let's define our terms. Pastors, theologians, and religious believers deal in theology, which, as St. Anselm put it, is faith-seeking understanding. That is, you begin within a religious tradition, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, etc. You begin within the tradition, and then you examine the world through those faith glasses. That's how you make sense of the world, through that perspective, through those glasses. Religious studies scholars, on the other hand, study religion and faith and church like they would any other cultural phenomenon through the lenses of the social sciences. Hence, you have the fields of the psychology of religion, sociology, and anthropology of religion, and in religion's dialogue with, in the hard sciences, especially physics and biology. In this series, I'll be sharing this series tonight, next week, and the week to follow. I'll be sharing what we're learning from the social sciences about religion, its origins, and its future. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So says Genesis 1, the first of two creation myths in Genesis. This one, Genesis 1, written during the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BCE. And it extols the benevolent power of Israel's God in contrast to the counterfeit nature gods of Babylon. Genesis 2, beginning at verse 4, begins another creation story written by a different author 400 years before Genesis 1, during David's reign and his successors. And later, Genesis 1 and 2 were put together, combined by a later editor. So here's the question. If the earliest written religious texts that we know of are Sumer's Kesh temple hymn and Egypt's so-called pyramid funerary text, both from around 2600 BCE, and the Epic of Gilgamesh in 2100 BCE, upon which, by the way, as you know, the Epic of Gilgamesh was the basis of the stories of Adam and Eve, the garden, and the flood. And if the Adam and Eve stories are written between 1000 and 600 BCE, then what did religion look like before all these written texts? What did religion look like before Adam and Eve? That's what we're going to talk about tonight, and next week, and the week and next week. Dutch primatologist Frans de Waal studies the moral behavior of animals, chimps, bonobos, and other primates, and has studied what we might name religious impulses in early evolutionary history. He has convincingly argued that both aggression and empathy come before the appearance of human beings. Aggression is older than empathy. You find it already in reptiles. Empathy's origins begin in mammals. And precisely, and here's the key, precisely in the behaviors of parental care, especially the maternal care of their offspring, which, de Waal argues, results in a whole host of adaptive human capacities, which we would call religious: emotional responsiveness, community building, social bonding, compassion, friendship, marriage, family. Not present with pride, but the seeds. De Waal concludes, the seeds of human love, he says, can already be found in mammals' maternal care. I find that to be revolutionary. And we'll return to that later. I'll read the second one. Along with people in other creative professions, such as artists and musicians, many scientists experience transcendence. I do so every day. For one, it's impossible to look an ape in the eye and not see oneself. There are other animals with frontally oriented eyes, but none that give you the shock of recognition of the apes. Looking back at you is not so much an animal, but a personality as solid and willful as yourself. And of course, we know this from that famous daughter of a congregational minister, Jane Goodall, too. So fast forward to the Paleolithic period, and important planetary and evolutionary changes. The Ice Age, which impacted migratory and other cultural patterns. And the hunt, etc. The Middle Paleolithic period, with increases in tool technologies and further migration. And then the Upper Paleolithic, where we'll be spending most of our time tonight. The Upper Paleolithic period, also known as the Late Stone Age, 50,000 to 12,000 years ago, witnessed a creative explosion in human brain capacity, in the neocortex, the development of technologies and tools. Human imagination begins to develop, language and symbolic thinking, the roots of art and religion. Art and religion appear together in human evolutionary history. And rituals of initiation, the hunt, planting, and harvest. Here we see the arrival of the first version of ourselves, Homo sapiens. The fossil records and archaeological evidence show an evolution in the brain that allowed for creativity and eventually a sense of the self, what Carl Sagan called matter transformed into consciousness. This emergence of consciousness, this understanding of the self, this symbolic thinking and representation in art led to placing oneself, to understanding oneself as part of a larger world, and also rituals of awe and reverence. Awe and reverence. We're going to look at three pieces of archaeological evidence tonight: ancient burial caves, woman figurines, and cave paintings. Shanidar Cave in the mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan was discovered by Dr. Ralph Solecki in the early 1950s. One of the largest sites of Neanderthal fossils in the world. 10 skeletons, 8 adults, 2 infants. Author Jean Auel used Solecki's research, mixing fiction with archaeology, to write her 1980 best-selling book, Clan of the Cave Bear, and its sequels. The fossils span burials from 70,000 to 40,000 years ago, and they challenge the previous theory that Neanderthals were brutish, subhuman. They had more complex cognitive processes than we previously thought. One of them, an elderly male dubbed Nandi, was blind in his left eye, showing signs of trauma and severe injuries that had healed, indicated he would have needed caring for himself throughout his life. Archaeologists also found clumps of pollen around another, suggesting someone in the last ice age walked through the mountains collecting flowers for the dead. Think about that. What that says about the human thought process. Care for the sick and elderly and purposeful burial already 60,000 years ago indicates developing cognitive and creative processes as well as advanced community concerns. $25,000 to 30,000 years ago, 3 teenagers were buried together in a grave near the Czech village of Dolní Věstonice. The triple burial was discovered in 1986. The bodies were covered by burnt spruce branches with ivory figurines, spearheads, bits of reindeer bones, and wolf and fox teeth all around them. The male in the middle was covered by the other 2. Had a marked curvature of the spine, suggesting he was severely disabled. The male on the left wore a painted mask, lying on his back with his hands on the middle one's pelvis, which was covered in red ochre. The male on the right, lying on his stomach, with his arms linked with the middle one. And the men on the sides wore necklaces of canine teeth and ivory, and all 3 had red ochre on their heads. So now let's shift gears to these figurines. In 1864, a figure of a woman was discovered in southwestern France, about 3 inches, 17,000 to 14,000 BCE, headless. She was called Venus impudique by the man who found her. Immodest Venus, a reversal of what classical scholars called the Venus pudica, the description of Venus statues in classical Rome, which often shows the goddess covering her breasts and her pubic area. She was the first of hundreds of small female statues found in remember when I say upper Paleolithic, 50,000 to 12,000 BCE. The first of hundreds of small woman statues found in the upper Paleolithic sites across Europe and Western Asia. Scholars originally called them, as you see on this chart here that I put up on the slide here, they originally called them goddess figurines or Venus figurines. But today we understand that as Western appropriation for figures that were created millennia earlier, as well as it gives a layer of meaning perhaps not originally meant. I just simply call them woman figurines. Barakat Ram woman was found in the summer of 1981 on the Golan Heights in Syria. A red pebble, approximately 1.5 inches long. 3 grooves cut into it by a sharp-edged stone. The neck cut deep, the arms cut shallower. Its possible dates are so wide, 600,000 to 233,000 BCE, because it was found between 2 layers of ash. So it's hard to really pinpoint its date. It is the earliest example of representational art in the archaeological record. And it's so remarkable because rather than being made by modern humans, Homo sapiens, whose art really doesn't appear until around 50,000 years ago, it would have been made by Homo erectus hunter-gatherers. That's what's so fascinating about this piece. Described in the May 14th, 2009 Nature magazine, this figurine was found in the southwestern German cave Hohlefels, among woolly mammoth carvings dated to 33,000 to 40,000 years ago, with ivory carvings of a horse's head, a half-human, half-lion statue, and horse, reindeer, and cave bear bones. You can see it's only 1 inch tall, lacking a head, a carved ring above the shoulders, preserving some polish, suggesting it was worn as a pendant. Large breasts, 2 short arms, carefully carved hands with visible fingers resting on the upper part of the stomach. Microscopic study shows a sharp stone tool cut deep horizontal lines on the abdomen below the breast. Her legs are short and pointy, her buttocks and genitals depicted in detail. Montpazier woman is among the oldest pieces of prehistoric sculptures found in France, dating from 30,000 to 25,000 BCE. It was recovered in 1925 in a field of ash and has a large buttocks and belly and an exaggerated vulva. Dona Venice, this is the Spug woman, found in 1925, broken in two near the triple burial there, a brown, black, light brown, but with black markings in the crevices, ceramic female statue, 6.5 inches tall. Using a microscope, researchers found a child's fingerprint, 7 to 15 years old, who handled the statue before it was fired. Her face featureless, a belt beneath her sagging breasts and broad hips. 4 holes in the top of her head. Scholars believe were to hold herbs or flowers for some ritual purpose. More than 700 figurines were discovered nearby depicting Ice Age animals, lions, rhinos, bears, horses, owls, and mammoths. Lauselle woman. She's not another statue, but she comes from the Paleolithic period. She's a limestone bas-relief discovered in 1911 in a rock shelter. 18 inches tall, 25,000 years old. Her stomach swelling, wide hips, no feet, prominent breasts, and navel. She places her hand on her abdomen, red ochre still present on her. And she holds a cornucopia with 13 notches. Most scholars believe this symbolizes a connection between the number of moons and the number of menstrual cycles in 1 year. Moon and menses have the same root word. And there's a Y on her thigh. And her faceless head is turned toward the horn. And probably the most famous is the Willendorf woman, discovered in 1908 at Willendorf, a southern Austrian village. 24,000 years old, almost 4.5 inches tall, carved from limestone, not local to the area. Her vulva, breasts, and swollen belly are pronounced. Her tiny arms folded over her breasts. She has no face. Her head covered with those plated horizontal bands. She also doesn't have any feet, so she can't stand on her own, leading to speculation that she was meant to be held rather than viewed. We'll come back to this later, but if this was what you found, pre-writing, if this was the evidence that you found of our ancient ancestors, our prehistoric ancestors, what would you conclude about what they thought, what they believed, what their values were? Let's look briefly at 5 caves to discern what we can know about Paleolithic humans and their religion. The Blombos Cave in South Africa, located 180 miles east of Cape Town along the shore, excavated in 1991. Evidence of hunter-gatherers from about 100,000 BCE, including shell beads and other pieces of jewelry painted again with red ochre. Stones with geometric designs, all dating back to 71,000 years ago. Some of the oldest signs of symbolic thinking, of human creativity. The cave of Chauvet in southern France also contains some of the world's oldest known Paleolithic cave paintings, named after Jean-Marie Chauvet, the leader of the explorers. Discovered in December of 1994, radiocarbon dating reveals it had been occupied by humans from 32,000 to 30,000 BCE, with bear prints and their sleeping areas And between 27,000 and 25,000 BC, only a child's footprints, torch smoke on the ceiling, and charred remains of ancient hearths as evidence. And remember, these are in caves. They're lit up now, right? So we can see them. But think about what it would take for our earliest ancestors to put these paintings, these markings on these cave walls. And why? And why? Walls were scraped smooth before they were painted. Line and dot stencils were made before they were painted. And red ochre handprints. And hundreds of animal paintings, many, many different species, horses, cattle, reindeer, lions, panthers, bears, owl, rhino, and hyenas. And also this mysterious figure. The lower body of a woman, her legs, genitals, she's pregnant. The oldest part of the painting, the upper body of a bison, the only human figure in the entire cave. The extremely emphasized pubic triangle was shaded in later. This might be one of the most famous caves. It was on the cover. I don't remember the year, but it was on the cover of National Geographic and was made the headlines around the world. Boys discovered the caves of Lascaux in southwestern France in 1940. Paintings that date from 24,000 years ago. Hundreds of bulls, ram, leopard, griffin vultures, and other animals, a virtual Paleolithic bestiary. Plaster models of breasts are found with skulls and teeth of boars, foxes, and weasels, and beaks of griffin vultures. The Hall of the Bulls. Drawings of the hunt. And also a pregnant animal with large ovals and arcs on its side and two long straight horns. And here's one. In the deepest part of the cave, at the bottom of a 16-foot deep well, a man with a bird's head and bird-like hands with an erect phallus, what anthropologists believe could be a symbol of a shaman in a trance who flies like a bird into the dream world. But we don't know. His hands reach out, one to the bird, one to the bison. The bottom of a 16-foot deep well in the furthest recesses of the cave. Again, why? How? The horse and bison are partners of the goddess of fertility. Their presence on cave walls is a powerful symbol of male virility. The cave of Trois Frères in southwestern France was discovered in 1910 by three brothers, Trois Frères. Its cave art dates to 15,000 to 12,000 BC, so it's late in the Upper Paleolithic period. With an amazing prehistoric bestiary of scores of animals. Dr. Herbert Kuhn, one of the great explorers of previous generation, when he walked into the cave with his team and they lit it up with torches, the hall in which we're now standing is gigantic, top to bottom, a whole wall covered with engravings. There we see beasts that lived at the time in southern France: mammoth, rhinoceros, bison, wild horse, bear, wild ass, reindeer, wolverine, muskrat. Also smaller animals appear: snowy owls, hares, and fish. And one sees darts flying everywhere, flying at the game. Truly a picture of the magic of the hunt. The hunt keeps coming back again and again in these paintings. The oldest animal hunted in the Northern Hemisphere, thus, the oldest animal whose remains are given ritual significance, is the bear. Bear skulls have been found in caves in the high Swiss Alps over 7,000 feet in altitude, preceding the last ice age, 75,000 BCE. This wounded bear stands out, covered with darts, wounds, spears, blood from its mouth. And as you remember, right, taking a bear's life, just like the buffalo in America, in the early America, right? Taking a bear's life was a sacred act. The bear sacrifices its life for the sake of the tribe. The bear is a partner. The bear is a partner in this sacred circle of life. And in the cave, we find two shaman figures incarnating their spirit animal. The first, an upright, horned figure in the midst of a morass. You see, John showed me, there it is. You see, in the midst of this morass of wildlife, making for a successful hunt. And in the cave's main sanctuary, we find another shaman, 30 inches tall, the only figure that's painted in black, standing out from the rest. A lion's or owl's round eyes, a stag's antlers and ears, and a lion's or bear's raised front paws. Only his feet are human. A horse's or wolf's tail and a flowing beard. The final cave, Angles-sur-l'Anglin, near Vienna, discovered in 1927 with continued exploration between 47 and 1957, dates from around 14,000 BCE. Also known as Sorcerer's Rock, it has striking animal carvings. And this is why I included the slide here. Carved in the limestone, three women, 6.5 feet tall, side by side, yet interconnected, missing head, arms, and feet, with pronounced pubic areas at different stages of maturity. According to anthropologist obstetricians who were called in to study them, the one on the left is a young pregnant woman, bulging body, a line connecting navel to pubic bone. The middle one, more mature, rounder shape, emphasized breasts. And the age of the one on the right is unclear. And even though you can't see it on the slide, they hover over the horned head of a bull. Well, so If this was a classroom, I'd now give my students the opportunity to tell me what they make of all this. So be thinking about what would you make of all this about, remember, the topic for tonight is early religion. Religion is about meaning making. My definition for religion, we're going to do this in a couple of weeks, but and I'm going to give you a whole host of various definitions of religion by various scholars and practitioners of faiths and others. The definitions I've used are that which creates meaning, identity, value, and community. Notice it could be theistic, it could have a God, but it might not. Or it's the answer to the question, we all want to matter and we all want to belong. Again, I'm talking here not as your pastor, I'm talking as a religious studies guy. How were these people making meaning, and what was the meaning they were making? Well, there's been a whole host of books recently written on the subject indicating you know what they show? Our continuing search for our origins, which is part of our larger quest for meaning. Where did we come from? So some of you may have read, I know Harari's Sapiens was a very popular book recently. It was one of the texts I used. So let's have at it. Number one, we need to make, you okay, Don? All right. All right, thanks. Important caveats we need to make. As we reconstruct human history, we must take care not to read into the past our own philosophical, political, cultural, religious prejudices. So this book that has this controversial book that's really taken the West particularly by storm, archaeologist David Graeber and anthropologist David Wengrow's The Dawn of Everything, remind us that history is not linear, that tribal societies were diverse and advanced. And one of my real mentors, Robert Bellah, sociologist Robert Bellah's Religion and Human Evolution, testifies, as I mentioned earlier, to the pre-hominid, pre-human roots of play and language, communication, and love. In fact, he says that one of the predominant things that human beings received from their pre-hominid ancestors was the ability to play. And so he calls humans Homo ludens, the playful human. And they both Graeber, Wengrow, and Bellah, take us to significant and complex prehistoric societies outside of Europe. You notice that I tended to focus on Europe because they tend to be our ancestors here. But we can't forget. So that's why it's a caveat, right? There's other things happening in other parts of the world. 2, about 200,000 years ago, we see rapid developments of technologies. For example, in addition to stone, we now find bone, ivory, and antler needles, fishing and hunting arrows, digging tools, and ornamentation. Religious consciousness began to develop about 100,000 years ago. Abstract designs scratched on mineral pigment show up in Africa about 75,000 years ago, and paintings on cave walls in Europe about 40,000 years ago. Widely accepted by scientists as sort of a proto-language, a pre-form of language, and the beginning of symbolic thinking. I mean, you see the word art here, A-R-T, but that's not art. That's a symbol for art, right? So the sort of idea that paintings were symbolic, evidence of symbolic thinking and self-awareness, which are the foundations of art and religion. While other hominids migrated out of Africa, 3, probably a couple of million years ago, Homo sapiens migrated 60 to 70,000 years ago, where we find the first primitive cave art, expressions of symbolic thinking as kind of an externalized language. The Lascaux cave, for example, has been studied. I find this so interesting. I just learned about this really as I was preparing for tonight. The Lascaux cave has been studied by a subfield of archaeology called archaeoacoustics, which discovered that the placement of many of these paintings in the cave was intentional. Sounds made by striking certain stalactites and stalagmites, marked with red ochre, mimicked the sounds of the hoofbeats of the animals that were painted on the walls nearby. And others created simple musical tones. Four, through art, sound, and ritual, Homo sapiens began to align themselves with nature's rhythms and the heavenly bodies and the earth and the animal world, and began to create an early sense of self, early meaning making, early religion. Making meaning is at the heart of what makes us human. So that now we're not just the knowing human, Homo sapiens, but the self-aware, self-reflective human, Homo sapiens sapiens. And the most primordial way of communication with the world is through the body. Human beings are incarnational beings. Hence the importance of embodiment and male and female sexuality in early religion. By the way, this PBS series, How Art Made the World, I've used this with some adult classes at this Tuesday morning class I teach in Fort Wayne. And it's a wonderful series, and I'd recommend it. Next, since Paleolithic times, blood was closely associated with ritual and worship because life was believed to have been carried in the blood. Red ochre, which showed up in so many different, on the figurines and in the cave paintings, symbolized the blood. For example, it was found on corpses folded in the fetal positions, ready for rebirth. Blood was the basis of clan and kinship and inheritance. And this is one of the reasons why women were accorded such a high status in these ancient societies, because they were the transmitters through birth of the clan's blood. And therefore, its spirit. They were transmitters of the clan's blood and transmitters of the clan's spirit. Menstrual blood was poured over fields in the spring and also used for healing. Men attempted to imitate menstrual bleeding ritually through circumcision. Scholars believe, and we'll get to this next week, scholars believe that later male priests invented menstrual taboos, that we find in the Old Testament particularly, but you find it in other religions too, invented menstrual taboos to ostracize women from rituals, teaching that a woman's menstrual blood was unclean and therefore needed to be replaced in sacred ceremonies by blood from animal sacrifices. These were, of course, male priests. 6, caves played a large role in the lives of these prehistoric humans in the Stone Age. They provided shelter and protection, sure, but the ritualized placement of the dead in caves, as well as paintings on their walls, many in the deepest recesses of the caves where no light could be found, suggest a more intentional and symbolic purpose. The paintings were catechisms of the hunt, surrounded by animals on which they depended. They were symbols of the interdependence of human beings with the animals that surrounded them. The cave also served as a sanctuary, a sacred space. The walls of the cave, think about this now, the walls of the cave were the womb of the universe, upon which were inscribed the symbols of the world. It contained the world as they knew it. Male, female, life, death, plants, animal life, the hunt. Even intimations of another realm, a spirit realm. Again, the cave as a womb that holds all life and from which all life, all creation emerges. Seven, Graeber and Wengrow, by the way, dismissed the woman's figurines as, quote, discarded period Barbie dolls, or, quote, a way of honoring female elders. Well, I appreciate their innovative take on hunter-gatherer social systems, but this is too facile of a view. These statues are too stylized. No distinct facial features on most of them. Exaggerated breasts, thighs, buttocks, pubic area, large stomach, possibly pregnant, short, stubby legs, unable to stand on their own, meant to be carried, and red ochre, sign of menstrual blood and childbirth. Women were responsible for the abundance of harvests because they knew the mystery of creation. They were the ones who knew and who carried within them bodily, the mystery of creation. Eight, from at least 50,000 years ago, our human ancestors symbolically depicted the entire universe as the woman's body and her natural processes. Menstruation, conception, pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, nurturing, connected to the earth's rhythms of planting, growth, nurture, fecundity, and even death. The generating and regenerating powers of the earth. This has prompted many scientists to view this, and it gets developed in the next 6,000 years into an image of a goddess. But this is the first stirrings here of the personification of the universal mother, Mother Earth. 9. I'm only going through 11. Stick with me here. Given the climate crisis we face, this is one of the reasons why many are leaving established religions for nature-based spiritualities. Yoga as an embodied practice, or more secular practices that emphasize sustainability and earth care that put them in touch with the created world and their own body. Or for those who remain in their religious traditions and their churches. They're rediscovering these ancient roots within their own established traditions. Emphases on climate justice, deep ecology, it's called, the recognition that nature has an inherent value and dignity, care for the earth, rituals, etc. Three quick examples in Christianity. Of course, you know them. Matthew Fox's Creation Spirituality, Sally McFaig, The Body of God and Ecological Theology, and I love this guy. He calls himself a geologian, Father Thomas Berry. We come into being in and through the earth. Simply put, we are earthlings. The earth is our origin, our nourishment, our educator, our healer, our fulfillment. At its core, even our spirituality is earth-derived. The human and the earth are totally implicated, each in the other. If there's no spirituality in the earth, then there's no spirituality in ourselves. So we've come full circle. What primatologist Franz de Waal concluded about our primate ancestors 100 million plus years ago, that parental care, especially maternal care, is the evolutionary origin of empathy and love. It's now pictured artistically in cave walls and figurines, symbols of a dynamic, animated energy, an eros energy, encompassing the entire range of all that is. Woman, lover, mother, sage. She is fertility, creation, growth, preservation, and death, too. She is eros energy, out of which all life comes, to which all life goes upon its passing, both origin and goal of life. For our ancestors, woman with a capital W is the primordial personified symbol for all life. Beginning here, she will transcend all dualities. And I want to, she's not, later on, this kind of general woman is going to evolve into a goddess, a personification called goddess. But she's not a goddess who's a counterpart to a god. She's a goddess who holds within her. We're bereft of language that's expansive enough to capture what she means, right? But this is woman who encapsulates within her gods and goddesses, male and female. She's the embodiment of all of nature. She's the womb that births it all. She's beyond, yet includes, like I said, gods and goddesses, male and female, heaven and earth, human and plant life, and all that is. All that was and is and ever will be is within her. Next time, we'll trace the evolutionary history of religion among Homo sapiens sapiens, the self-reflective human, during the Neolithic age from 12,000 BCE to 0, culminating in the Axial age, which is 800 to 200 approximately BCE, and the rise of religions. If you want to know, well, where does religion come from? The religion, as we call it today, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Taoism, Confucianism, Greek philosophy. What were the forces and factors that resulted in these things, all coming to the fore, 800 to 200 BCE? That's next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Michael. We're going to take a few minutes. Let's have questions, the things that started to spark an idea in your head. We'd like to have you do one of two things. Either shout loud or wait for me to bring you the microphone. Who has questions? Anything that comes? Sure.
It seems to me that what you talked about, I know more, I see it in the indigenous people around the world, much more than in organized religion. My question doesn't have anything to do with the meaning of all this, but I'm just curious. These ancient art, statues, whatever, how do they put a date on them?
Radiocarbon dating. Yes.
Sort of along the same line, to what extent, I mean, you're asking us to think about what these things might have meant. And I can imagine student after student in classes and so forth doing the same kind of thing. To what extent is trying to understand these things been done through the eyes of indigenous peoples?
You know, that's an excellent question. It has been. The social scientists, for example, if you know Clifford Geertz, the great anthropologist, American anthropologist, he's done work with in the South Pacific with indigenous peoples. You know, a wonderful book, one of the best books I've read in the last decade, The Wayfinders by Wade Davis. He's a National Geographic scholar, explorer. Right, wrote a book called The Wayfinders. And if you're interested, you can find his lectures on YouTube, Wade Davis, The Wayfinders. And he does the same thing. So what I've tried to present is not just Mike Spath's view, but kind of a general consensus. But and it's based on anthropological studies and other studies with indigenous peoples.
I have a question here.
Hi.
You said something about putting aside our assumptions and so on. Would you tell us what your assumptions are?
You know, that's an excellent question. I believe that human beings are meaning makers. That it is impossible if you take seriously my definition of religion, what I gave it before, that which creates meaning, identity, value, and community. I believe it's impossible for a human being not to be a religious person. In that sense of the term, we seek to make meaning. Not everybody agrees with me on that one, but we're meaning makers. And so we find ways to make meaning, and that's what the religions we're going to find next. We're going to find next time that that's what happens in the axial age, and we not only do that with language. You know, we're word people, especially. I mean, I'm looking. I don't know your religious traditions background. I'm a recovering Lutheran, but you know, we're all Protestants are all about words, you know, and what I've had to unlearn, and I'm not sure I've done it completely, is to try to decipher meaning in non-language symbols like art. And that's a dicey business. You know, language doesn't happen, like I said, at least written language. Just think about what happens. I'm looking around the room. Most of you were around before email. I tell my students, I mean, my kids even, you know, laughing when I say, I remember when my parents bought their first 12-inch black and white Motorola. You know, and I remember party lines with our telephones, you know, and, you know, all of that. So okay, you resonate with me. But think about just the advances in communication and how each advance, you lost something, but you gained something. You gained something, but you lost something. So I'm having to, so my being embedded in language as a Protestant, I'm a United Church of Christ guy now, but as a Protestant, I'm having to unlearn some of that and give credence to these kind of images as potent symbols. And not only these images, but also rituals, the importance of ritual. What are the three languages of religion? Myth, meaning your origin stories, the stories that bind you together as a community. Myth, symbol, and ritual. And so those are the three languages. And so I'm trying to learn how to give credence to each one of them as powerful parts of human communication other than words. So I'm probably not giving the best answer for you, but that's what comes to mind as I stand here before you tonight.
May I push you one bit? In our religious tradition, the stories that are told start with God, and then humans develop out of that concept. When did images of the divine show up in the thinking?
Yeah, later. Yeah, late.
Oh,
Yeah, well, you can see that. So between 12,000 and we're going to do this next week. 12,000 to 2,000, the Neolithic period, right? So we're gonna find this movement toward not just nature kind of energies and forces, but now they get personified as deities, and then not just tribal deities, but then in the axial age they become, and I'm going to say this next week, universal deities, but they're only universal for the people who believe them. And we'll go into that next time. But Don, that's a later development. And I'll just say one other thing. You know, when you say, well, we start with God, and then we work down from there. That is a powerful statement that you just made. I don't want to just run by it, because that in itself is a faith statement. That in itself is a faith statement that's beyond, like, I mean, as a Christian Protestant, as I practice my faith, I can do that, right, in church on a Sunday morning, or as I teach Sunday school and all the rest. But once I step out of a church setting and into a university setting, right, and I take off the theology hat and put on the religious studies hat, I have to look at things as a social scientist would, right, studying the phenomenon of religion. And as soon as you say, well, God, that's a faith statement, right? It's not a state. I mean, we can talk about people who believe in God and the effect of people, you know, the effect on people's lives who believe in God, but we can't talk about God as a factual, historical being, you know.
we have one more.
I've got time.
Can you hand this?
Thank you, Don.
Hi.
I've been really intrigued with how their relationships with the animals were.
Yeah.
You know, and today we go out to the jungles and really want to kill off this and get that. And the bisons and the bears, and then the figurines. There was a lot at the 700 stuff. I think you said there was quite a few animal figurines. Very fascinating.
Well, you know, for the longest time, it's not just in Christianity, right? But I mean, I'm assuming I'm talking to a basically Christian crowd. Maybe that's a wrong assumption, but but you know, the misinterpretation of Genesis in terms of, you know, taking dominion and what that means. You know, the word dominion comes from dominus, which means to be lord over. And the other religious traditions the same. Some more, some less, but there's been that emphasis. But it's only been recently, right? And it hasn't started within the religions, unfortunately. It started from our concern for the world in which we live, the concern for the environment in which we live, right? That has caused us, who are religious people in the narrow sense, who belong to religious traditions, churches, etc., to look at our own faiths and to say, what are the resources that have been there all along, but we've been ignoring them so that we can care for the bloody planet? Then we can stop the violence, not only with each other, but with the animal world and the plant world and the planet itself, Mother Earth. And that's the point I was making at the end, because now why is this kind of study important? It's kind of esoteric, but it's also important because it leads us back to the earth as our home and the earth as our mother. And woman, in the largest possible sense, nurturing, feeding, giving birth to all of life, right? So I'm with you. I'm with you. I thought we had until 8:30.
Thank you. Thank you. You've given us something. I got a feeling we're going to be thinking a lot.
I
here.
thought we had a little longer, but that's okay. Are you wanting to wrap up now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, come back next week. I know that this seems kind of a little, you were expecting maybe something else about religion, but next week we're going to talk about each one of the religious traditions and where they came from and why, the factors and resources that led us into the various faith traditions in the world. John?
I just want to thank everybody. Thank you so much for doing this, and ask that everybody just take a minute to fill out this little evaluation. It means a lot to us to have that. And Don, since you're only around 60 years old, would you help us remember the whole list of the people who have, the organizations that have jointly sponsored tonight? I don't think they all got named. I know the assembly and so on. Did you do that?
I'm not following you.
I don't think we named all of the organizations that are joint sponsors with the Chautauqua. Can you help me reconstruct that so we don't miss out?
Right now?
And yes, just so people hear their name.
Who's here from college and who's here?
Just name the organization.
Yeah, this down at the bottom. This came about very quickly. This came about because Chautauqua Wawasee contacted Carl Shelley. Carl contacted the people, and we began to put the thing together. We just rallied around. We have College Mennonite, 8th Street Mennonite, Assembly Mennonite, City Church of the Brethren, Silverwood, Goshen College, Greencroft Chaplains. We discovered these people can work together and find something and make it happen. Yeah, you'll find them on here. Thanks very much, very much. Look forward to seeing you next week. Think about what you want to ask, because let it cogitate. It'll grow. Thanks much. Drive careful on your way home.